free speech mean extending a hand to the most offensive speech out there?
I wouldn't say extending a hand. Free speech means barring the government from limiting most communication of one sort or another, and included in the most in America, and hence free speech, hence First Amendment, is outrageous, offensive, more than off-putting, racist speech, which every other Western democratic country would deem criminal. I mean, I've cited in my book statements of Donald Trump when he ran for president. What he said about Muslims and Mexicans was very controversial. In Europe, it would have been a crime because of their hate speech laws. And a good deal of what occurs and what is said in a political context, a social context, and the like here would not be protected speech in Canada or England. I'm not talking about Russia now. I'm talking about great democratic countries that care about free expression but don't have anything like the level of legal protection for it that we have.
Where do you think the line should be drawn?
I think the line ought to be drawn, at least for us, and I do distinguish us from countries that have gone through very different histories. I don't criticize Germany for making it illegal to deny the Holocaust, or India to crack down on certain language which has caused communal violence in the past. But here, I think the bounds ought to be as sweepingly broad. And yesterday's opinions, by the way, by the Supreme Court illustrate that. All but unanimous opinions of the court in areas where the public might well come out the other way, whether we can keep a convicted sex offender from going online in areas where children can go online, held unconstitutional by the court in a sweepingly broad opinion dealing with the nature of the new communication media that we have in this country and the need to protect it. So I would keep it very broad. Sure, we have exceptions, incitement to criminal conduct. There are some things, of course, we define as not speech, even though they're words. I mean, spying is illegal everywhere, here too. Libel is not protected here. We give more protection for speech against libel laws here than anywhere in the world, but we have libel law, we have privacy law, but we limit them, we cabin them all because of the First Amendment and because of our sense that we're not prepared to risk that level of government involvement and ultimately government censorship, which could otherwise overcome us.
Jameel, how do you take on that question? Where, if at all, should a line be drawn?
You know, I think I ultimately come out where Floyd comes out. I don't find it an easy question at all. I grew up in Canada. I think Canada has a very healthy democracy, and it draws the line somewhere different. So it doesn't seem obvious to me that the sky is going to fall if we draw the line somewhere differently. I also feel like Floyd does, that other countries have made understandable judgments about where to draw the line, where to draw their lines based on their own histories. But it's not like we don't have our history, and we have our own history here, and we ought to learn from our history in the same way that those countries will learn from their histories. So I've never been somebody to whom it was obvious that we should protect hate speech to the extent that we do protect it. To me, the best argument for protecting it is that the alternatives seem worse. I'm not enthusiastic about giving the government the authority to decide which views are sufficiently hateful and which ones aren't. I think that those judgments would have been made differently 20 years ago than they would be made today, and they might be made differently 20 years from now than they are today. But I think that it's dangerous to, I don't mean to suggest that, that Floyd was doing this, but it's dangerous not to recognize the cost of the line that we draw. These words are not costless. The words really do cause real harms. They make it more likely that people will get hurt in the real world. And people do get hurt in the real world because of the words that we use. So we shouldn't, I don't think that we should take for granted that the line that we've drawn is the right line. I don't think that we should think that speech is free in this particular sense. This is not, again, a response to anything that Floyd said. But ultimately, because I don't know what the alternative is, I don't know what the, what palatable alternative might be out there. I'm more comfortable with the line that we've drawn, that the Supreme Court has drawn, than I am with any other that I could think of.
And I'll ask you the same question.
One thing we need to consider is that if we were to move to a model where hate speech is outlawed, for example, you're not doing anything to address the underlying animosity at issue. I'm an openly gay man, and I would rather know if someone hates me because of my sexual orientation than to not know. And especially if that person is a government official with the power of the state behind him or her. I want to know that so that I can act accordingly, take whatever actions I feel I need to take to protect myself and my community. I've had this conversation with civil society in parts of Europe, and we've had a pretty healthy debate over that very issue, and the view there is that there's a sense of a public forum which must be kept sacrosanct, and that it's sullied when certain words are spoken. And I understand that, and I agree that it's not my place to judge a different country's system given their own history and their own beliefs. But as an American, and as someone who was raised in this country and in this environment, that's always been my view, that I'd rather know if someone is hateful, because at least then there's an opportunity to engage and try and change hearts and minds, even if you're not going to be successful at that. So that's one, that's one element to this that I think we need to consider. The other thing is, there's really excellent work by this woman. She's a professor at American University, Susan Benesch, and her project is about not hate speech, but dangerous speech. What is the speech, the words, the coda, that predictably indicate that someone is going to take the next step into violent acts, some form of acting on those beliefs. And it's really interesting work. It informs a lot of how we view it at Google, our approach to our own platforms. But that's a different set of considerations than what we were just describing. Most hate speech does not lead to violence or acts. So perhaps another reason to be very cautious in taking a different approach than what we've taken already.
And I